TGIM. Thank God it is Monday, today, the 26th of July, 2021. You are all very welcome to this edition. And I believe that we are all going to be blessed and we are all going to be challenged in our work. I will request us to mute our mics unless we are talking so that everyone can have a good listening experience. And today we are having our third conversation on redefining work. We have so far had 2 sessions where we are trying to redefine our understanding of work. And with that, our approach to work. And these conversations are based on the book, Redefining Work Redefined, A Different Spirit. I know some of us may have read it, some may not have read it, but it is all well. In the first conversation, we discussed the crisis in which work is in, and we came to a conclusion that today, most people approach work just because it is going to give them money, just the job description. And we also saw that when it comes to many in the public service, actually there's a lot of disengagement in the public service, but that we ought to approach work from a different angle as believers. Last week, we saw the example of Daniel, who worked with distinction and with a different spirit. We saw that Daniel was among a group of young people that were taken captive in from Israel to Babylon, and he was picked out together with some of his friends to join the service of the king. He was picked out because he was strong, he had a high IQ, he was intelligent, he was well learned, and also able to learn. But one of the key things that made Daniel different was that he declined to eat the food that was prepared by the king. And this was significant because it would have been contrary to his beliefs. The food that was offered to the king was offered to idols first, and so it reflected pollution. And we agreed last week that we should not allow to be polluted with so many examples of this pollution, such as corruption, such as our bosses are forcing us to do things we do not think are right. And we say that we should stand even if it means facing dire consequences. And so today we move on, and we are looking at an interesting aspect of work, mere work or a calling. A very interesting question. How do we look at work? Is work a calling or not? And I'll open up the discussion straight away at that point. How would you describe your current work? Do you feel you're called to that work? Or do you feel you just found yourself there? What is your view? Please share with us. Or what is your reality? At times what we want and reality are different. So what is your reality in terms of your work? Anyone wants to go? Do you feel God called you to that place?
Okay, Grace here.
Yes, Grace.
Let me just, I usually love listening to other people without contributing much, but let me set ground so that we can have people get in, because once one begins, other people always come in. Okay, currently, what I'm majorly doing, I'm a baker. Of course, there is ministry. Once in a while, I help with events management and planning. I'm an events planner, but the events planning thing comes in once in a while. Someone has an event, a company has events, workshops. So it's not like an everyday thing, but yes, it's one thing that I do, and I do passionately well, because I hate going to functions and I see things uncoordinated. But what I majorly do, what brings in Kamane every now and then is the baking part. Baking, yes, as much as I do it for money, but I love it. I do it with all the love. I do it with all the prayers. And my prayer is always that. I'm sorry about that one. So I do it with all the love. To me, it is more of a calling than actually work, because it even helps me to be able to minister to people. Sometimes I always say that my cakes are therapy, because they come with a lot of love and a lot of prayers. So to me, just as much as I'm getting money from it, but it's love. It's not something where I'm going to be like, this month I didn't get maybe my target money that I was looking for, so I'm throwing in a towel. Let me look for a new business. Let me look for some new work. No, I'm not tied here. I'm not imprisoned there. I love what I'm doing, and I believe God is in it. And yeah, I believe it's not just work. Yes, it is work, but I also believe that it is a calling.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Let me stop there for now.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Grace. Amazing. It's called to be a baker. Any other person, do you feel your work is a calling or not?
Ernest,
yes,
this
please.
is Ruth.
Yes, Ruth.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. Now, I believe where I work now is, yes, I believe where I work now is, God wants me to work here where I am working. It is, I've been in this kind of work for quite some time, and I believe it's God's placement in this period of time for me. I work in research, and it is very interesting work. However, it does not remove sometimes the aspect of knowing that it's actually work. Sometimes it can be like, Banange, today it's real, it is not for being happy, it is for real, it's for real hustling, you know? So sometimes we have the tendency to think that when you're in your calling, things will be a bit smooth or the workouts. Kumbe, that's not the case. You actually work just as much as, I think, as someone who doesn't think they are not working, only that the difference would be in the attitude. But the hard work will also be happening in the calling. And for me, that's what I sometimes experience, especially on weekends. On a Monday, when the weekend was very busy, my God, that Monday can be like, oh, today it's work, kumbe it's a calling, you know? Yes.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Ruth. Okay, Joan has typed. Thank you for typing. My understanding of the work I do currently is it is God-given ministry that calls for service. After a season, God assigns another ministry. Okay, thank you for sharing that, Joan. I want to hear from one person whose experience has been a bit different. Somehow you do not quite see a connection between your calling and what you're doing. Do we have any such experience, anyone with such an experience that they are willing to share with us? Or let us think about it this way. The career that you pursued, what you studied, is it what you're doing now? Or if not, why not?
Can I share, Ernest?
Yes, Lydian, good to see you. Please go ahead.
Good to see you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much, Ernest. It's after you rephrased the question that I thought, well, I can share in that angle. This morning, I was chatting with a friend who said, well, there's this here, I would recommend you. I told them I can't take it because I would overcharge them. And so I was telling her work for us is our calling, is ministry. Yes, we get money out of it, but ultimately it's for the glory of God. So for you to say that you won't work somewhere because you're overcharging them, it means you're undermining the work, thinking it's for a certain class of people. But wherever we are placed, God has put us there for a purpose. But to answer that question of what you have studied versus what you're working at now, for me, it's one thing that amazes me and everyone. I am into humanities. I studied humanities, and then I find myself doing right now currently mixtures that are healing people. And I'm not a scientist. And at times we don't understand the science of mixing this and this and the other, and ulcers have been healed, and fibroids and organ issues, and there's no connection between your humanities and medicine. But then I realized that from 2017, I have been praying to God for the gift of healing. My family members were sick, and I said, God, I know they don't ask for the fruits of the Spirit and the gifts, but I'm asking you to give me the gift of healing, that I'll just go and lay hands on everyone and then they are healed, you know? And then this 2021, I realized that God has actually answered that prayer another way. It's not spiritual, I'm going to go lay hands on the sick and they are healed. But through these remedies, as I'm making them, I start praying like, was it Grace was talking about her cakes and praying for them. For me, as I'm making these mixtures, I say, God, I pray that even before they take this mixture, they will be healed and there will be a difference in their lives. So I am seeing God use me in an area where I'm not even an authority. And at times you're humbled to mix things and people get healed, but you're not a scientist. You don't even know the chemical formulations or what. My brother now who is a scientist is always taking me on. So what are you mixing and what quantities? So I say, I don't know. All I know is that I'm mixing things and people are getting healed. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Lillian. You remind me of the blind man who was healed, and when asked, he says, me, I don't know what they did or whether they are sinners or not. What I know is that I was blind, but now I see. Thank you for sharing that experience, Lillian. So I know that many of us, what we do eventually is not what we studied. I'm wondering what could be the disconnect. Could it be that we didn't hear God right? Which of the two did God call us to? If I studied medicine and I am into, in terms of career, I am actually into maybe social work. Did I not hear God right? Where was I called or not called? I would like to pick our minds on that. And how can we align the two? How can we align the two, the calling, what we study and what we do? Any takers? Let me see who I should ambush. I don't want to ambush anyone. Anyone want to share the experience on that? Why do we think at times people study different things and then they do different things? And then, and which of those is our calling anyway?
Ernest, can I say something?
Okay, yes, please. Yes, Ruth.
I'm called Ruth. I'm one of the people who believes in the fact that there is nothing like wasted knowledge. You might have studied something and currently you're not using it, but at some point in life that you will use that knowledge. You'll use that knowledge. For example, my current work is in research, but recently I ventured into doing business. And the things that I studied a lot of math. The things that I studied that are not straight statistics that I'm using in research have come up to my advantage. So I really believe that, for example, usually in my career, they are what the subjects they call, not the courses they call BSc, flat courses. You know, you've heard of those flat courses, right? Yeah. So when someone takes that flat course, there's this reasoning that they give that you're not going to get a job, it's not a professional course, it's you're wasting time. But as you go into life, you realize that it's not wasted. I have a typical example of a friend of mine who did zoology. You've ever heard of zoology in Makerere? Yeah? It's one of those
That's
courses
where they
say
study
you
about
study.
how to make zoos.
Funny not zoos, like funny stuff like plants, leaves. There are all sorts of things, insects, but when the people who study it are usually ridiculed that they're wasting time. But for this particular friend of mine, when she finished that course, it's BSc zoology and something chemistry. Anyway, she took such a long time to get work. So she would be doing all sorts of things. But one day, someone connected her to go and do a course in Germany. And that course was connected to her, the fact that she had done zoology and chemistry at campus. So I am a believer of the fact that no knowledge is wasted knowledge. Even if you think that you wasted your time doing something and you're doing something else, at some point somewhere, those two will connect. Over.
Thank you for sharing, Ruth. And then just one more question before I share a few ideas. I have heard people say, I am called to be an apostle. I'm apostle so and so, prophet so and so, and I am going for ministry. And then that means that the work is locked up, or that I take leave and then I go to do what I am called for, say, to evangelize. What is your comment on that?
Can I share Ernest on that?
Yes, Lydian.
Calling versus what you studied. I took off 3 years to raise my daughter. I felt called to stay home and raise her myself. So I took off time off for more employment, but I'd studied, then I'd even had my master's in literature. And I was home, quote unquote, as a housewife. And I got to a point where the baby is sleeping and I had some time, so I started to write. And I wrote my things. I got to a point where I thought I had finished to write. I said, well, I need an editor. And so I thought if I get an editor, I'll have to pay them money that I didn't have. They're going to sit on my work for a long time. Probably they might be less qualified than I am. And so I said, so why do I have a master's in literature if it's not for me to write and edit my own work? So then my qualification, even if I was home as a housewife raising my daughter, I was able to write, I think, about 3 to 4 books using my knowledge. So
wow.
I think there was a connection somehow, that the time I took off to raise my daughter gave me time to write. And then my academic qualifications and knowledge and wisdom was able to give me good quality work. So I think somehow, like the last person shared, there is no training or knowledge that goes to the waste. Somehow it will always come in helpful. It will save you some dimes, but also some time. Yeah, and maybe, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that experience, Lillian, how we are still able to use what we have learned. I will share a few thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm not going to share a PowerPoint because like I shared with those that were on the call from the onset, just as we were going to start, I accidentally overwrote it and I lost it, but it is well. I want us to reflect about God and creation. We see that God.
Ernest,
Yes, please.
Ernest, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please, go ahead.
Sorry, I have issues with my network, so there was a point I wanted to make some contribution and I missed it. Okay, I think yours is going to be very, very interesting. If you don't mind, allow me to make a few comments general on what has been shared.
Yes, go ahead.
The first one was Miyawako calling. And over time, I have come also to ask the definition of a calling with many people. With several examples, I have people who are even older than me who felt the Lord had called them and they left in the middle, even towards the end of their courses they were doing at university. Some have gotten on well, but unfortunately several that I know have ended badly. I know of, without mentioning names, a friend I was with who was reading engineering and was, I think, in third year. Some pastor came up around and I think talked to him together with another sister, and they abandoned the course. Then I was in leadership of the Christian Union. I tried to talk to them, and one of them told me of saying, I had nothing to do with it. So I said, okay. The other one I didn't have opportunity to talk to. And so they went, they started off well, participated in church. Down the road, I think the person who came to convince them went away. And one time I was moving through places, a bit of distance away from here, and I bumped into this brother. And he was so desperate, he was looking for a job. Now, if he was going to get a job, he was going to get it as an Six Silver because he didn't have any qualification, but he was already a third-year engineering student. The sister, though I did not personally follow up, faced exactly the same. So that whole definition of calling, and I suspect you are going to be touching about that area, needs proper understanding. I think that the issue is even bigger among, without sounding attacking and discriminative, the Pentecostals. There is a way that we tend to talk about the Holy Spirit as somebody's secret, and once he talks to me, he can't tell Ernest anything. But also, like I was listening to a small caption somewhere, we sometimes substitute common sense for prayer and say, I've prayed and this is what he's saying, when there is glaring common sense. What I normally tell friends who are pursuing professions that come to me and say, the Lord is calling me, I tell them I agree with them. But the calling, God doesn't say the calling is now. It does no harm for you to complete your course as a medical doctor, and then you go into pastoring. That is okay. Because sometimes people make decisions, or people have certain experiences, and when they pray, they have this feeling. Unfortunately, they tend again, quote unquote, spiritualize it and say, yeah, this is the calling, but it may have long-term consequences. I think because rather in the interest of time, let me stop there. I wanted to say something about to give my testimony of what I read, what I do. But I think time is not on our side. I want to let you share what you have. Thanks.
Feel free. You can share the testimony in 1 minute or two, because I believe we learn more from conversations with each other.
Let me try, Ernest, and see if I will condense into that. My first profession is teaching. I am a teacher. Then I got specialized in administration. Right now, I'm not teaching, but yes, I am doing administration. But the job I'm doing is quite interesting. One of the subjects I read is political science and public administration. But that did not come immediately. In fact, after that, I went and did a little more teaching because I thought, yeah, I love the teaching. I have passion for teaching. The main thing being, or the interest of it, the heart of the matter being impacting people. When I look at some of the students that I first taught, many are in very influential positions. But I'll leave that aside. When I came to do the job that I am doing, there was an interesting experience. Somebody came and proposed the job to me before I did my application. Can you still hear me, friends?
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
You know, I wasn't so sure about it. And I told the boss who was interviewing me, I was bold. I really must thank God. He gave me the boldness. I asked my boss that I needed a week to go and pray about it. I mean, whether they believed in what I said or not. So I took off time and I prayed. And I mean, God answers prayer. I'll never forget 3 or 4 main points God gave me. And you know, I am where I am now for 10 years. Every time I have a challenge, I fall back to God and I pray and I see the Lord coming through for me. So there I am, a bit of that mix, but very interesting on determining whether, you know, this is a calling or whatever. One thing I know is I enjoy what I do. I have passion for it. I think I still influence people. It may not be as much as I did at school, but I think I am happy for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Baker, for sharing with us that rich experience. I believe we have all been blessed. And once again, thank you all for joining in. Those that are first timers, you're welcome. Those that have been with us, you're welcome. I'm glad to see my all-time friends, Pastor Brian, you're welcome. Leonard, all the way from Kenya, thank you for joining in. You are welcome. I'll just share a few ideas, a few from the book, A Different Spirit. I'll not share everything that's in, but just a few pointers so that we can get an idea. When we think about work, it is good for us to go back to the source of work, the first worker. And we see in the Bible that the first worker is actually God. The Bible, the first thing the Bible tells us about God is actually that he worked. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God made. Now, my understanding of making is work. Okay, so right from the beginning, we see God working. He creates the world. And there's something I find interesting about how God works, how God creates, is that he takes it step by step. Every day he creates, he sits back, evaluates and says, wow, this is beautiful. And then that's when he moves on to the next day. And eventually, like we all know the story in Genesis 1, he rests on day 7. But he rests after he steps back and after he's created man and says, wow, this is very beautiful. Now, God rests after making a perfect creation. And that gets me to reflect about our work. When do we rest? Do we do what we are doing perfectly? Or do we do and then they have to tell us to redo? I like Lillian's testimony and self-editing. I was reflecting on the work that I do, that I submit to my supervisors. How much editing does it need? God's work did not need editing. He created it, it was perfect. So do we rest after perfection, or do we rest time? Does our day end because it is 5 o'clock and my JD says 8 to 5? Or Do we rest because we have finished the work that was set for that day? How we'll do this will be partly dependent on whether we see this as a calling. So when we see that when God finishes creation of the rest of the world, he then creates man. And God places man in the Garden of Eden. Why? God has been a maker and he creates a prototype of himself, because the Bible tells us that he creates man in his own image and likeness. That means that he is a prototype. And because God naturally is a worker, he calls man into the service of work. And the purpose, God gives him the purpose. I grew up hearing that the purpose God created us was to worship him. But when I look at Genesis 1 and 2, when God creates man, then what does he tell him to do? He tells him work. He puts him in the Garden of Eden and tells him to look after all creation. In chapter 2 of Genesis, it tells him that he put him in the garden to work and to keep it. To work and to keep it. That creates 2 points of his calling. He calls him both to increase it, multiply, increase, be fruitful, fill the earth and have dominion. That is to increase, to be fruitful, but also he calls him to preserve it, okay? Because he tells him work it and keep it. So our work should be having at least one or both of those aspects. It should be to increase, to build, but also to preserve. And why is it being preserved? It is being preserved because it is beautiful. If I have made something beautiful, I don't want it destroyed. But if what I have done is not beautiful, then it will need to be redone. So God calls us into those spaces, into specific spaces, which we may call our gardens of Eden. And he calls us into them to work them. To work them how? To work them in the same way that we have seen God work. How does God work? And that is what we saw in Genesis 1. Perfectly, to work in perfection, to work in distinction, and to work in such a way that we can rest after that. So that by the time we are breaking for the day, the work for the day is done. So that by the time we're taking our annual leave, then we are done. We are not taking it just because we're not taking it just because the leave, just because our JD allows us to take leave, but because we have actually finished our work. And that's what Sabbath rest means. We rest in the Lord because we are complete and because we have completed the work assignment at any particular moment. And we see that God creates man in his image and his likeness. Now, those are two attributes of God that he expects us to bring into work. How? His image, to look like him, okay? If you say that is the very image, that means it looks like that person. That speaks to character, that God expects us to work with his character attributes. And then the second is with his likeness, which is his creative ability. God expects us as well to be creative in our work, because that is a space that he has called us into. Whatever space God has given you at any particular moment, he has given us that general calling to work. So our calling is not just on Sunday. I had a member of staff who would leave work early saying she's going for ministry. No, the ministry that God has called us into is that very space where he has opened an opportunity for us. Yeah, I think it was Ruth who shared that not every day will you wake up feeling, yeah, I'm on top of the world with this work. This is God's work. No, sometimes we shall wake up and we don't feel like going to work. Sometimes we shall get to work and things look like they're all not working right. But even in that environment, what will help us is us remembering that God has placed us in this space as a calling. That means that even when I am about to move on, I will work diligently up to the last day, knowing that I am resting from that assignment and moving on to the next space where God has called me to work. So I want to encourage us, I want to challenge us to approach our work as a calling, because indeed that is the space that God has called us into, that we should work with a distinction, both to keep or to preserve and to work it and to multiply it, and to ensure that it grows. If it's not growing, then we need to get back to him and ask him, God, how do I make this work to grow? And also to do that with the character of God, and to do that with the creativity of God. Once again, I want to thank you, and I want us to use this remaining 10 minutes for a discussion of the implications of that work as a call. And I'll start with the question that Edward, thank you for joining us this day. Edward shares, if God puts man in a garden, does it mean that the primary work for humans would be farming? What is the view of those who do not take manual work seriously? Okay, do I have any comment on that? God calls man to a garden. Does that mean that we all should be farmers? Any comment on that?
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Micah?
Yes, sir.
It's very interesting. Within what you have explained, we are at work with the element of creativity. Now, when you expand the farm or the garden, a lot comes through. If one is going to produce, take the context of our country, coffee or cotton, you will not produce cotton forever. You'll need a factory to work on that coffee, cotton, so it will go to the next level. And so you'll find you are creating industry. And in industry, some people can specialize there. So I think, in my opinion, the garden does not limit us in terms of meaning and definition to the actual garden where Adam was, and full stop. I think it expands. When you talk about creativity, all this comes in. And when you talk about industry, many other things are now going to come in as a result of that. Let me leave it at that for now, for others to comment.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Papa Baker. Yes, what I was saying is that God places man in the garden, but God tells man, be fruitful, increase, multiply, fill the earth, and have dominion. And actually, when you see how God defines that garden, Genesis 2 gives a rich description of that garden. It had minerals, okay? The Bible says it had minerals, it was rich with minerals. That means that the garden or the ground was just the starting point for him to be creative. Man was supposed to work in it, but also to use the creative ability to expand it, because eventually you will find that everything we have today in the world actually has its origin in the soil in one way or another. The metals that make the
Right.
cars are from the soil. So work in the garden includes manufacturing. And
Right.
so work in the garden does not mean just agriculture, but also that means that agriculture as well is part of it. Okay.
Yes.
So whether the
That's
work we
true.
do is intellectual or is manual, it does not matter. What matters is doing that, using every space that God has given you to fulfill that call to work. If it is land, work it. If it is an office, work it. If it is a classroom, work it. Yeah, whichever space that God has given us, we should use as work. I'll invite, do we have any other comments or any other question from members? Just one more because our time is also up. Okay, it looks like we have no other comment or question. So I will leave you with this challenge. How do you approach your work? Especially in the moments of pressure, the moments of tension, the moments when things do not seem like they are going right. Do you throw in the towel? When it looks like, what motivates you to work? Is it the external factors? Is it your paycheck? Is it, I mean, what would happen if you worked and for a whole year you have not been paid? Does that mean that you now become sloppy? If it is God who called you to that space, then in being sloppy, you are telling God that he did not know what he was doing. What happens if your bosses are on your case? They ridicule you, they do not consider you serious. Still, that's a point that you remember that your actual boss is not the supervisor that you report to. Your actual boss is God. And it is God that you will be answerable to at the end of the day. His word tells us that our works shall be tested. God on Judgment Day is not only going to ask you about how much you prayed, how much you tithe. Some of us think that a tithing is the epitome of godliness. No, the epitome of godliness lies in fulfilling your calling. So God on Judgment Day will ask you about that Uber that you drive. Did you drive it right? Did you tamper with the gauge so that you could charge people a little more? If work is a calling, then we should approach it with distinction and with the grace of God. Thank you for joining us this morning. And indeed, thank God it is Monday. I encourage us to get into whatever work we are doing, whether we are working from home or we are working from office or we are working home. In other words, we do not have a job that is bringing in money at this time, but you still have work. I encourage us to do it all as a calling from God. Thank you for joining in this discussion. Once again, our time is up. I appreciate each and every one of you that has joined in today. I have been blessed. And next week, we shall continue and we shall be looking at competences for work. And next week as well, we shall have a guest presenter as well. Once again, thank you, Alan, thank you, Brenda, thank you, Brian, Dorothy, Edward, Elizabeth, Esther, Farida, Grace, each and every one of you. I cannot mention all the names. Joanne, thank you for joining us again. And Maple, Ruth, Shelley, Tom, thank you for joining us today. Join us again. Sylvia, thank you to my wife, Sebia, as well, for always joining in. Thank you, each and every one of you. God bless you for the rest of Monday. And once again, thank God it is Monday. God bless you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Ernest.
Ernest.